Hello, my name is Julia Martins. I'm a researcher and instructor at the International Center for Cooperative Management, St. Mary's University. My goal today is to walk us through each element of our framework and explain why they're included and how they are relevant when evaluating complex networks. While we have designed the framework to be simple, concise, and intuitive, we recognize that interpreting its components can leave room for certain nuances. This is particularly true given that individuals may have different understandings and interpretations of the terminology and concepts within the framework. It's important to keep in mind that the framework is a tool meant to guide the evaluation process by providing a comprehensive picture of the key components that contribute to healthy, robust cooperative economies. However, this does not mean that the framework should be treated as a checklist where all elements must be present to qualify a cooperative network. Instead, it is a living and evolving guide that adapts to different contexts and it reflects the dynamic nature of cooperative networks. Let's dive in. The framework is organized into 6 main categories. At the top tier, we have the what, why, who, and how, which typically remain fairly consistent across different networks. These are followed by the context variables and outcomes, where we see the most flexibility depending on specific environments. The first category or column in our framework is the what. We will spend more time here as it's an anchoring piece of the framework. This refers to the network infrastructure, which we call the means of organization. These are the conventional ways in which co-ops coordinate their activities and build connections with one another. It represents the types of relationships and connections that exist within the network. In complex networks, we're likely to identify more than one of these means of organization coexisting. It is rare to find a complex network that relies on only one type of infrastructure. Instead, we usually see a spectrum of network complexity. This doesn't necessarily mean that the network is evolving through different stages, but rather that it's common to encounter varying levels of intricacy when examining the relationship that sustain the network. The means of organization depend on the nature of the relationships, the linkage strengths, contractual frameworks, objectives, and sectors involved. Variations range from informal collaborations through personal relationships to completely integrated cooperatives like into a single economic entities like cooperative groups. At different levels, these networks leverage their participants' strengths, resources, and expertise while sharing risks and rewards based on mutuality, solidarity, and reciprocity. Don't underestimate the value of informal collaborations in sparking the development of complex networks. We call them informal because they happen in a less structured way, usually outside of formal contracts or institutional frameworks. These collaborations are driven by shared interests among peers who engage in meaningful conversations and explore potential partnerships. Now, while these informal collaborations might seem like weak ties, and in some ways they are, as we will discuss later when we talk about the importance of institutionalization for sustaining networks, they are actually crucial. They play a significant role in spreading information and resource. In economic terms, we often refer to this as the strength of weak ties because these relationships reflect trust, and cooperative problem solving. It is hard that informal collaborations are hard to identify and track, but they likely happen in like more often within sectors or among membership types that naturally connect and share know-how. But it doesn't stop there. We also see this process happening across sectors and even between cooperatives and non-cooperative organizations. Now, these informal collaborations often evolve into formal business relationships between cooperatives. But it's important to note that co-op to co-op business operations can also start completely independently without any prior collaboration or personal connection, okay? In the co-op to co-op business category, we see formal partnerships between institutions that share common values, engage in activities like purchasing, supplying, financing, and procurement. These partners can be governed by legally binding contracts or through more informal arrangements, creating a range of operational frameworks. And most enterprises, whether they are cooperatives or not, are part of value chains that rely heavily on suppliers for raw materials, components, or services to keep their operations running smoothly. They also need to secure funding and attract skilled labor. However, as cooperatives work to acquire these necessary services and resources, they often face a challenge, which is finding peers within the ecosystem who share their values. While it's perfectly fine for cooperatives to contract with non-cooperative businesses, healthy cooperative ecosystems typically show a stronger preference for doing businesses with values-aligned partners. We can see that, for example, in fair trade supply chains where values-based exchanges are essential. Now, when we talk about the ICA Principle 6, what we often see in action are second-tier co-ops. It's probably the first thing that comes to mind, right? Primary cooperatives frequently need extra support for enterprise development beyond what typical co-op business relationship offer. So to meet these needs, primary co-ops form second-tier co-ops, allowing them to combine interests, minimize costs, share risks and rewards, and pool resources under central coordination. These second-tier cooperatives can take several forms. Co-ops might establish a consortium agreement between dependent co-ops to achieve a specific goal or project, or they could create a formal second-tier co-op, such as an association or federation. In the case of consortia, rather than having a dominant leader, the consortium itself is controlled by the primary co-ops, enabling horizontal organizational structure for strategic collaborations. The consortium can serve its member internally with tailored services and engage externally through contracts with third parties, or even opt for a more flexible structure that activates only when there is demand for ad hoc contracts with external parties. Second-tier co-ops can also take the form of associations or federations, focusing on representation, collaboration, education, and policy advocacy. Member co-ops maintain their autonomy but come together for strategic alignment and movement building. These organizations are typically structured as sectoral, regional, national, or supranational bodies. Now, what I'm going to say now, it's not a rule, as we will see lots of associations and federations outside these boundaries, okay? But in general, associations often operate within specific sectors, like the Credit Union National Association or the World Council of Credit Unions. However, some do operate across sectors, like the BC Cooperative Association, the International Cooperative Alliance. But federations like the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation are typically organized around a single stakeholder model and offer technical services, support, and cooperation with local stakeholders. Then we have co-op groups as a separate category. We talk about groups when we have networked co-ops that reached a much higher state of integration, operating as a single economic body. Here we introduce the presence of a central holding with executive power. Co-op groups may also include other businesses as subsidiaries and trade with non-members. A prominent example is the Desjardins Group in Canada. And lastly, a multi-stakeholder network forms when different co-ops, each with unique members and business models, come together to strengthen their presence in the market and achieve economies of scale. They do this through shared values and collaborative governance while still keeping their independence. These networks are completely decentralized. There is no holding or second-tier co-ops coordinating them. This strategy of multi-stakeholder networking help co-ops align different interests, reach social goals, and keep democratic accountability, all while maintaining a higher impact in their industry. These networks can take many forms, from co-op only to beyond co-ops. We often see them bringing together public, private, nonprofit, and financial groups to provide public goods and support community development by connecting across different sectors and sharing resources. One example is the Namaste Network in Colorado, which is a network that brings together single stakeholder co-ops in the solar industry to scale and innovate their operations. Another example is the Alliance for Cooperative Development in British Columbia, Canada. And this alliance united co-ops, nonprofits, the public sector, civil society organizations, post-secondary schools, and other partners to build capacity and support cooperative development in the province. So informal collaborations, co-op businesses, second-tier cooperatives, groups, and multi-stakeholder networks are all the main arrangements by which co-ops build relationships in a complex networking process. And the following question is, now, why do cooperatives form networks? Why work together with other co-ops? The purpose of cooperation reflects the needs and benefits of intercooperation. While the specific reasons might change depending on the context, we often see a combination of factors driving co-ops to network. We've identified 6 key reasons why cooperatives form networks: to pool resources, reduce costs, align strategies, provide public goods, achieve economies of scale, and raise awareness. And when we talk about resources, we mean this broadly: intellectual property, physical assets, technology, information, finance, legal support, and human resources. Networking allows co-ops to access a wider range of assets, which might be out of reach or too costly to develop on their own. This collaboration also helps them to cut costs. For instance, co-ops might negotiate bulk supply agreements, share a facility to lower real estate costs, or outsource expensive services like payroll and maintenance. Co-ops also align strategically to pursue common goals and expand their market reach. Some even join forces to provide goods and services that benefit the wider community and meet social needs. Growth is another key motivator, whether it is expanding geographically, increasing membership, fostering innovation and improving financial stability. Through networks, co-ops can access new markets, strengthen democratic practices, and drive cultural change. Lastly, co-ops seek to raise awareness and become more visible as a business model. By debunking misconceptions about their governance, structure, and viability, they can showcase their benefits and present themselves as a strong alternative for new enterprise and conversions. Well, so far we have focused exclusively on cooperatives, their network infrastructure, their purpose of strengthening them. However, in reality, cooperatives rarely operate in isolation when building their economic ecosystems. While they are the main drivers of this process, creating complex networks within a cooperative economy requires the involvement and support of many partners. The who or agents who are the enablers of the network. The more complex the network, the greater the diversity of ecosystem partners needed to sustain it. Okay. Cooperatives typically engage with a range of partners from the wider social solidarity economy, and these include professional co-op developers, consultants and leaders, regulators, policymakers, educational institutions, social economy enterprises, common interest groups, civil society organizations, communities of practice, and international bodies. Each of these agents contribute to complex networks in different ways. So the how represents the many functions these partners perform to strengthen networks and the cooperative economy. They do this by providing technical support, building capacity, implementing co-op-friendly laws and policies, advocating and representing, supporting education and research, incubating new co-ops, accelerating growth, fostering relationships, and providing financing. It's important to note that we don't assign specific functions to particular agents. This flexibility allows the system to adapt with different combinations of roles depending on the context. And regardless of who takes on these tasks, they are all essential for maintaining a healthy ecosystem. Ideally, we want to avoid a situation where one or a few partners take on too many roles. This can lead to burnout and make the system very fragile. We need diversity and decentralization so that changes in one partner don't jeopardize the entire system. We delve into this nuance shortly when we present the assessment framework, so stay tuned. As I mentioned in the beginning, the first four categories, the what, why, who, and how, remain fairly stable across different cooperative economies. However, we need a way to capture the fluid and adaptable aspects of different economic environments. That's why context variables form a category of their own. Context variables refer to the unique interactions between elements that set one network apart from another. Regional cooperative economies are distinctive in how their elements interact. Even if a region has all the necessary networking agents and functions to sustain the ecosystem, the dynamic will differ based on specific context variables. Since complex networks respond to setting-dependent factors, the way these elements interact will create a unique network identity. So the health and sustainability of an ecosystem depend not only on the presence of its elements, but on how context variables influence the strength and resilience of these elements within the network. Context variables include history and path dependence, embeddedness and social cohesion, co-op density, and the macro culture. Different networks also differ based on the broader outcomes they generate. When we talk about network outcomes, we are referring to the effects that extend beyond the immediate goals of individual cooperatives. In this category, we emphasize that complex networks are driven by a larger mission that transcends direct financial and non-financial benefits for the participating agents. These networks create ripple effects that benefit society as a whole. Everyone gains from the positive externalities, such as a healthier economy, enhanced reputation, sustainable development, and greater social and economic resilience. Also, these networks contribute to the creation and sustainability of new co-ops and help building a lasting intergenerational infrastructure for future cooperatives. In fact, the presence of an intergenerational structure is not just an outcome, but also a key parameter in our framework for assessing a network's maturity. We recognize that identifying these elements is important for understanding what is current, what might be missing, and what could be deficient in a particular network. However, simply noting the presence or absence of these elements is not enough to determine how sustainable and resilient a network is. So we developed an additional tool that provides that helps us accurately assess the state of a network through a set of standards. Our assessment tool is based on 5 principles and allow us to evaluate the unique interactions within ecosystem elements, providing insights into their strengths and weaknesses. And while some complex networks may defy general predictions due to their exceptional attributes, certain fundamental parameters hold true in most cases. These include the level of institutionalization of existing relationships, the diversity of agents, the presence of intergenerational infrastructure, the level of self-reliance enjoyed by individual co-ops, and the embeddedness of the network within the broader socioeconomic environment in which they operate. These principles are essential for understanding a network. So, how can we combine the building blocks of our complex cooperative network with the 5 principles for sustainable and resilient networks? Here we present an assessment roadmap that allows us to explore the strengths and vulnerabilities of networks. This roadmap connects the network elements, the means of organization, purpose, agents, functions, context variables, and outcomes within the 5 guiding principles for sustainable and resilient networks: institutionalization, diversity, intergenerational infrastructure, and self-reliance and embeddedness. And after identifying the existing and missing elements within the network under analysis, including the linkages and unique interactions among them, it is essential to evaluate whether these elements align with the highest levels of network complexity. So the diagram on screen outlines a potential pathway for this analysis. Remember, this is a flexible framework designed to be adapted to specific needs and characteristics of your own network. But I hope it provides useful and helpful, it helps you gain a clear understanding of the unique dynamics behind intercooperation. Thank you so much for your attention.